hard to guess, but I know Steve Forbes, the Forbes Media CEO, much more, has some thoughts on that. Always good seeing you, my friend.
Good to see you.
You know, it's interesting when you think, and I love to look back a year ago at the press and what it was covering, and of course the Ukraine war had just started, just a bit before, but the attention was on the expectation that the Federal Reserve was getting ready to hike. We had no idea just how much and how far that would go and how it would last to this day. What do you think?
Well, I think it shows a couple of things. One, the Federal Reserve is always behind the curve. Remember, transitory inflation.
I remember that very well.
The notorious phrase now. And they're probably overdoing it now. The only way they know how to fight inflation is by depressing the economy instead of the real way, which is stabilizing the value of the dollar, which has been like a yo-yo recently.
Yeah.
So you have an unstable currency. You have an economy that is going south, slowly but going south, stalling. And the Federal Reserve, all they know how to do is depress it more. So whether next month or this month they raise it 25 basis points or 50, they're still raising interest rates. And so you get a little blip, good news in housing, that's going to be crushed again. And then when the economy does go down unmistakably, they'll say, uh-oh, maybe we should cut rates, and then they'll panic in the other direction.
Right now, they seem to be holding on to the notion that they're not high enough. I don't know what your expectations are in the meeting later this month, but there was a consensus building for a quarter-point hike, and then some are saying, oh, gee, maybe given some of these strong numbers of late or stronger than expected, it could be a half point. And the next hike after that could be a half point. And they don't cease and desist for a long time. What do you think?
Well, that's, again, they're behind the curve. The unmistakable signs out there. You see it in consumer spending. You see it in business investing. You see credit card debt rising up, and all the signs that things are not as rosy as some people think they are.
So are they overdoing it?
So they're overdoing it.
They are.
And then, again, that gets to the fundamental point. The only way they know how to fight inflation is depressing the economy, which is what they did consistently in the 1970s. Depress the economy. Yeah, that brought prices down because people couldn't buy anything anymore. And then when...
That seems to be the only way to do it. Even with Paul Volcker, when he was raising rates a full point at a time, the idea was stamp out inflation. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs in that fight, but you'll get the inflationary beast under control. But only for a while, right? Because then things pick up again. Well, the economy gets active again, and rates go up again.
Well, what happened after Volcker wasn't so much the crushing of recession that conquered the inflation, is what he and the Fed did afterwards. Unlike the 1970s, they brought about, especially when Greenspan took over for a while, relative stability in the dollar. They started to do things right. The great moderation. Greenspan said in the 90s, he's got a sloppy, and he didn't use those words, but a sloppy gold standard. Look at commodity prices, look at gold price to see if things were getting out of line. Then he lost sight of it. But it was the thing what they did after Volcker that mattered, cutting taxes, cutting regulations, so you get the economy.
Yeah, we forgot about the Reagan 1-2 punch, Volcker,
they did things right. So they relatively stabilized the dollar, put in incentives to get the economy moving, and boom, we had the boom of the 1980s and 90s.
Yeah, you're right about that, and 20+ million jobs. Just the opposite message we're getting in Washington right now, where the president has been toying with some tax increases. He hasn't spelled them out, but I did raise it with Democrat Joe Manchin. I say Democrat for the time being, who wasn't too keen. This is from Joe Manchin yesterday. Take a look. The president indicated yesterday, Senator, quoting here, I want to be clear, I'm going to raise some taxes. He didn't outline what taxes he's going to raise. You limited those he wanted to increase a couple of years ago. Where are you on that, and what do you think he's talking about?
I don't know. I'll probably hear something today, hopefully, of what direction they want to go. But I can assure you, you can't basically just tax your way out of debt. You can't borrow your way out of debt, and you can't cut your way out of debt.
All right. Well, they should relax because they're not doing any of the above for the time being. No action on the debt of substance. But I'm wondering where you see all of this going.
Well, I think him putting down the marker, and I think other Democrats like Tester, senator from Montana, coming up for re-election in 2024. There are a lot of Democrats coming up, and so they're suddenly worried. How are voters going to react to this? Not to the far left, how they react. They want to get reelected.
And not only on things like ESG investing, but on raising taxes, or always going back to that.
So I think you're going to get some a little bit of common sense on the part of these up for re-election Democrats. And in terms of
but enough to overcome a no doubt presidential veto.
They won't be able to overcome a veto, but at least they'll stop the imposition of new taxes. And I think you're going to see regulatory pushback. dumbest thing they did was go after gas stoves. So the kitchen wars have started. Yeah. And people are saying, this is ridiculous. You've wrecked my dishwasher. You've wrecked my washing machine. You've wrecked my bathroom.
I always thought about that. You're going to go after gas stoves, fine, whatever. I'm just thinking there are so many more important things right now, including this underlying economy and all that issue. But let me get your thoughts on the market impact of this. Did you picture a year ago when all of this started with the rate hikes, we'd see little progress on inflation? I mean, it's been a year, and I know it depends on the inflation indicator, Steve, but it's still very high, still very stubborn. How long does this take?
Well, one of the problems is they didn't fully recognize the devastation of lockdowns on supply chains. You pull out one little piece of that and everything goes kablooey. So they underestimate how sophisticated those things were, and then they keep putting in new regulations. Last calculation I heard, over $300 billion in the last year and a half or so. We're going after fossil fuels, which obviously impacts transportation and the like.
Right.
So they're putting sand in the machine, putting sand in the gas tank. And they want to get rid of gas tanks.
Now they do. They want to get rid of it.
And so instead of nurturing the economy, the Democrats should go back to Jimmy Carter. In the late 1970s, he and Ted Kennedy led the charge on fundamentally reforming transportation in this country.
Completely deregulating it.
Completely deregulating.
Jimmy Carter.
And so we have the best transportation system in the world by far when you look at various countries. And that started under the Democrats. Why don't they go back to that? Why don't they go back to John Kennedy on cutting taxes?
Yeah.
There's no patents on those things.
You remember John Kennedy was getting more support from Republicans at the time than Democrats. Sadly, he died before a lot of those tax cuts were realized, but it's a sign that if you just look beyond the locked position of your party, you can get stuff done. Yeah.
And you can ultimately change the party.
Absolutely.
And so Biden, if he wants to be a real great president, should realize he's on a path to destruction. The economy, they keep saying, oh, prosperity's just around the corner, sort of the Hoover-esque thing of the early 1930s. And what they don't recognize, they're setting themselves up for a fall. And people don't trust anything. They don't trust health officials anymore. They see crime rising. You saw the real revolution in Chicago, the incumbent mayor, 16% of the vote, incumbent. Never happened before on that kind of scale. So voters are pushing back. They want things that work and candidates who can come up with credibility. Here's how we go ahead. Here's what's worked in the past, like a stable dollar, tax cuts, putting less rules on instead of more. The country prospers. And then the Democrats can pat themselves on the back of creating prosperity. They did nothing except leave the economy alone. They look like heroes, like roosters in the morning, saying, we bring the sun up with our cock-a-doodle-doo.
I got you.
So
you've been working very hard, Steve, you know that. But you're an uncanny read of things. I like how you summed up where things are going, like kablooey. That was, I think that hit the nail on the head. Always good seeing you, my friend.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Steve Forbes, one of the best economic minds